Also, what is with all these successful people being very strange? I had no money and a small house, yet I had plenty of women when I was single. Story 1. Famous people just get more attention. About 1 in 9 girls and 1 in 20 boys are sexually assaulted as minors. Over 90% of those who commit these assaults are family members or acquaintances. Story 2. Growing up, I knew barbers, coaches, managers, police officers, and preachers who talked to the girls I was in high school with about their relationships and experiences. As I got older, I realized that many women I spoke to lost their virginity in high school to men over 21. This really affected my perspective. Now that I have a daughter, I will be very protective of her as she grows up. Story 3. Sex predators are everywhere. Money and fame make it easier for them. Statistics show a shocking number of women have experienced sexual abuse, much of it occurring when they were children. Men are also affected. Story 4. Many people might know either a victim or a perpetrator of pedophilia within their close circles of contact. We still need to have our Me Too moment regarding this issue, and I believe it will happen eventually, revealing more than many realize. Why are so many successful individuals behaving inappropriately? Wealth often silences victims. I feel many would act similarly if they had the means to avoid consequences, but lack the financial resources for settlements or legal representation. Having wealth does not compensate for a lack of a healthy relationship with an appropriate partner. Some individuals seek power over children or turn to children due to unmet sexual needs with adults. Story 5. The jailbait subreddit was one of the most followed forums before it was shut down. The attraction to barely legal or not quite legal teenagers is prevalent. True pedophilia, the attraction to prepubescent children, is less common. However, opportunistic crimes also contribute to this statistic, as perpetrators may not exclusively target children but see them as convenient victims for sexual crimes due to their vulnerability and low power status. We struggle to discuss these issues openly. Whenever a case like Diddy's appears in the news, people express horror and engage in moral outrage, which is understandable, but we fail to adequately explore the underlying reasons and the extent of this ongoing problem. Many individuals are drawn to those who are not at the same maturity level, and this is a topic that needs further examination. Story 6. I will never forget this documentary on predator catching in the United Kingdom. The person in charge of the online unit mentioned that he had messaged over 1,000 individuals, and when he informed them that he was posing as a 13-year-old girl, only 2 individuals ended the conversation at that point. This indicates a much larger issue than any of us can truly understand. Story 7. Money gives people the power to act on impulses that are normally unacceptable. For example, someone may think one day, "Wow, that 15-year-old is cute," but the potential jail time isn't worth it, so they do not take any action. While it's a horrible thought, nothing comes from it because the individual isn't willing to risk jail time and a damaged reputation for one night with a young person. However, when someone is worth millions and has the finances and means to fight off any legal challenges, they may encounter this scenario and realize they have the ability to pay off people, fabricate lies, and use statements such as, "They are trying to damage my reputation," hoping for a payoff. In such cases, individuals with predatory tendencies may act on their impulses. Story 8. One of the most eye-opening experiences I had was when I was with a large group of friends discussing catcalling. The women shared the age they were when they first received sexual attention from an adult man. The average age was about 12, with the youngest being 8. No one was over 18. Even if they do not act on it, it is a much bigger problem among men than we would like to admit. When you are a celebrity, it is generally much easier to access victims and evade consequences. Story 9. There are therapy options available in Germany, but the waiting lists are consistently long. Individuals who have never engaged with others and do not wish to, due to ethical concerns, often find themselves isolated. In these programs, participants may receive medication to reduce libido if needed, which some individuals firmly advocate for in relation to pedophilia. However, there are not enough facilities to accommodate everyone seeking such treatments. One key takeaway I learned from documentaries about these therapies is that pedophilia is not necessarily an exclusive attraction. Many individuals may find themselves attracted to both children and adults. It is concerning that some of these individuals might manage to conceal their feelings until they achieve financial success, believing they then have the means to act on their impulses. Story 10. I had two predators in my family, my father and his brother. My childhood friend's stepfather and uncle violently sexually abused me for years, starting when I was 7. My other friend's brother and father also abused her. So I would say a lot. Story 11. We hear more about the rich and powerful, but they are also more emboldened to take advantage of others, knowing they can buy them off, hire good lawyers, or get powerful friends to help them. If it weren't common, we wouldn't know much about it. There wouldn't be shows like Law and Order, Special Victims Unit. There wouldn't be age of consent laws because there wouldn't need to be. There wouldn't be laws against sex trafficking or sex tourism. The film Sound of Freedom wouldn't exist. There wouldn't be many macho individuals who are eager to say, "If I meet a pedophile, I'll kill them," or news articles where that has actually happened. The concept of stranger danger wouldn't be taught in schools. I don't think there is a child molester lurking around every corner, but it is not limited to a few rich and famous people either. Story 12. A lot more than you think. I know a police detective in my small town with a population of 5,000 who said that such cases make up the majority of his workload. There is also a significant amount of unusual incestuous activity occurring, according to him. Story 13. There is a reason the Federal Bureau of Investigation has a whole division created for this. It is tragic and sad. I am an avid consumer of news, and for subjects like these, I gladly stick my head in the sand. Ignorance is bliss. Story 14. I hate to say it, but I believe it's probably about as common as other desires. There are many types of fetishes, but this one seems to be quite common. Story 15. Like in the whole world, an overwhelming number of cultures, countries, and even continents are complicit. I would venture to guess that the majority of unregulated sex workers worldwide began their careers underage. People only started to genuinely care about underage sex in America in the last couple of decades. I am 38 years old. I lost my virginity at 18 to a girl who was 17. Her previous boyfriend was 25. It wasn't a secret or taboo. It was completely normalized. Story 16. As I understand it, the word teen is consistently the most searched term on major adult websites. The question becomes more interesting from a historical perspective. The current concept of childhood is relatively recent. Historically, children were often viewed as small adults in most cultures, suited for work in fields and mines. Story 17. There is a lot happening in our communities, not just involving famous people. If you listen closely in your own neighborhood, you will notice many individuals. Many people of all genders experience sexual assault as minors. Personally, I was between 13 and 17 when it happened to me, and my best friend was 12 to 14. Family friends, relatives, teachers, including my favorite math teacher who was dismissed for inappropriate conduct with a student, coaches, religious leaders, co-workers, community leaders, and parents of friends can all be perpetrators. Offenders often place themselves in these environments to gain access to vulnerable children without raising suspicion or facing challenges about their behavior. That is why it is crucial to protect children by educating them on what is acceptable behavior and creating an environment where they feel safe to report incidents. It is essential that they know they will be believed and supported. Sadly, offenders are skilled at targeting the most vulnerable children, who may be too afraid to speak up or fear they will not be believed by the adults in their lives. Story 18. I would be curious to see a study on sex crime rates for celebrities compared to the average person, but I bet it is not a significant disparity. Story 19. Among the rich and powerful, it seems like a strange norm. The revelations about Sean Combs and Dan Schneider emerging around the same time are oddly coincidental. Story 20. My English teacher once said it is probably more than one might assume, and it can happen in a family with whom you are friends. One sign might be that children have fewer boundaries regarding where and how they touch you. This may indicate that predatory adults have told them it is acceptable to do so in order to make them comply with certain acts of exploitation. Story 21. I don't think it's as well organized as people like to believe. especially nowadays when it often seems like a political enemy is a pedophile. The rhetoric Alex Jones promotes suggests that it's much more common for the abuser to be someone within the family. Basically, anyone whom children trust and who has authority over them is far more likely to abuse than some random wealthy person with secret contacts to access minors. I believe that is much worse, a molester uncle or parents making pornography of their children to sell on the dark web for cryptocurrency. There are many more of them than the types like Jeffrey Epstein or Peter Scully. Story 22. Has P.Diddy been accused of actual pedophilia? Last I heard, all his victims were 19 or older. That's a distinction not many people want to make, but if you want to have a serious discussion about children, then you have to address it. Story 23. I assume you're using pedophilia as a catch-all term to include hebephilia and ephebophilia as well. There is likely much more occurring than what is currently being exposed. It has only started to come to light because of the internet, and even then, I doubt we are scratching the surface. It seems to be only the less cautious individuals who get caught. I don't believe pedophilia is necessarily more common among the wealthy and powerful compared to the general population, but wealthy and powerful individuals certainly have the means to indulge their harmful desires with minimal risk of facing serious consequences. That being said, to anyone reading this, it's probably best for your peace of mind not to delve too deeply into speculating about which influential people may be involved. Unless you are closely connected to these individuals or possess resources that provide more information than what is publicly available, that task is likely well beyond your capabilities. Most of the time, those playing detective from a distance end up completely off course. Story 24. I have no idea what news you are referring to, but I have always assumed there is much more than we actually hear. Many friends I grew up with have shared their experiences, and even my grandfather opened up to me about his. As a child, it is frightening, and you don't really understand what has happened to you or why. Most children do not speak up about it, and as people grow older, enough time has passed that they see no point in bringing it up. Unfortunately, many cases are left in the shadows. Story 25. Not men, but look at Instagram and mother influencers, or just general children's content. Pedophilia is far more widespread than we would like to know. Story 26. Having worked 12 years in the justice system, I can tell you that most people do not want to know the answer and prefer ignorance. It is rampant and pervasive. Story 27. The most surprising aspect of all these sex trafficking rings is that they are operated by multimillionaires for the benefit of other multimillionaires. Story 28. I believe there has never been less of it, and there has also never been more brought to light. It is terrible, but it is also something that used to never see the light of day. Story 29. Enough people should stop being shocked by it and actually do something about it instead of trying to defend the offender. It is hard to imagine someone not being sexually abused as a child. I have had people confide in me at work about sexual trauma from adults in their lives over the past 15 years. This included both men and women, as well as myself. Story 30. I believe there are 3 categories of individuals. 1. You are not a pedophile, and no amount of money will change that. You are a pedophile, but you keep it hidden because you do not have the money or fame to be part of that society that can get away with such behavior. You have enough money or fame that you can finally act on your pedophilic feelings without fear of legal consequences. Story 31. It is a deep-seated speculation of mine that many adults harbor underlying curiosity regarding inappropriate relationships, evidenced by the prevalence of scandals involving both men and women in human trafficking and school misconduct. This frequency suggests that some individuals may deny or speak against it to avoid suspicion. Only those with significant power and resources can effectively conceal such sinister acts. Take Judy Garland's case, for example. She was 13 or 14 when she was rising to fame, and yet that did not stop men over 30 from preying on her and treating her as an object. The stigmas associated with Hollywood have not disappeared as society has become more strict and intolerant. Rather, they have adapted to being more discreet. Again, it's not every adult, but definitely a majority, that either lack concern for the lives of others or simply do not care. Story 32. Kobe Bryant slept with a minor too, and he is celebrated like the next coming of Jesus, even in death. Story 33. It's a lot. This boys too. Watch your boys as closely as you watch your girls. You can alleviate paranoia by remembering everyone must stay in their roles. If it's a coach, he should be a coach, not just a ride to and from games for a busy single parent. Keep them confined to their roles. Tell your kids that if any adult gives them an uncomfortable feeling, they should immediately inform you. They don't need to have touched them yet. If an adult makes the child feel uncomfortable, you need to know. Story 34. I conducted some research on the subject, and it is traumatizing how prevalent it is worldwide. What is even more surprising is that when some perpetrators are caught, their actions are often overlooked. Additionally, accessing inappropriate material is alarmingly easy. Justice should be served for all victims. Story 35. Definitions and morals change depending on the country you are in and the religion you practice. Story 36. What you see in the news regarding child exploitation and sex trafficking doesn't even cover a fraction of what goes on in the world. As for why the wealthy engage in all sorts of strange activities, it's because they feel they can get away with it. One minute you are a successful person who has made it big. The next you might find yourself in a horrifying situation. The wealthy are notorious for playing power games among themselves. Once they gain leverage over you, they will hold it against you for as long as you remain in their circle. We live in a chaotic and troubled world. You either develop thick skin and desensitize yourself to it all, or you become consumed by paranoia and delve too deep into despair. Story 37. I sincerely hope I am wrong, but I estimate that we know about 10% of what is happening in the world. It feels the same with every important topic. It is a troubling reality at times. Story 38. I receive messages on Reddit frequently after I share my posts, even though I don't consider myself very good-looking. Story 39. The real question is how frequently governments use pedophilia to control politicians, judges, and celebrities. Story 40. Human trafficking is one of the most prevalent and widespread crimes in our modern era, receiving much less coverage than it deserves. The United States is both a large source and destination for this crime. It is true that money talks, but it can also silence effectively. Occasionally, a prominent figure is targeted, but one can assume that this merely diverts attention from other, potentially more important actors. Story 41. It happens more frequently and closer to you than you may realize. To put this into perspective, I am from a city in Germany with a population of 400,000, known for being upper middle class. Recently, news emerged that a large ring of criminals was discovered operating out of allotment gardens, which are quite popular here. Essentially, you rent a garden and can share it with others. They lured children there, exploited them, and filmed the abuse, resulting in a significant operation and network. We are talking about dozens of terabytes of data secured over many years. Yes, this occurred right under the noses of sweet elderly, well-off individuals in a medium-sized city in Germany. Story 42. There was an article circulating last week stating that large pools of DNA data, such as 23andMe and Ancestry, have revealed that at least 1 in 7,000 adults are products of incest. The real frequency is almost certainly higher, given that the sample submissions are self-selected and do not include acts of incest that did not result in a live birth reaching adulthood. This frequency is far more common than conventional wisdom suggests and likely has significant relevance to the question at hand. Story 43. The thing I've never fully understood is how these people seem to have no fear of being caught or reported. There is nothing worse than being a predator. I think even in the case of murder, some people might wonder about the circumstances. Did the person deserve it? Were you attacked? Was it self-defense? Was it momentary rage? From a rational, self-interested point of view, I truly don't understand how these individuals can engage in such behavior. Story 44. Unfortunately, I believe this issue is completely pervasive throughout societies worldwide. Children are vulnerable, and adults often hold positions of power. Some adults have impulses that compel them to harm children in order to fulfill their desires. This is by far the most insidious and damaging crime, one that we will likely never eradicate. Offenders will always exist, and children will remain at risk for various reasons. The vast majority of children who are victimized know their abusers, usually through close associations with their families. Parents should be more vigilant and begin educating their children about how to protect themselves and encourage them to speak up as soon as they can communicate. However, the hidden and secretive nature of child sexual abuse makes it impossible to protect all children at all times. It is important to be cautious about whom you trust with your children. Story 45. Far more common than most people expect, it is also not always the stereotypical creepy old man. Young men, middle-aged men, successful men, and friendly neighbors are often those you would never suspect. Someone you might pass on the street who you would never think could be a pedophile. As someone who was severely abused as a child by many men, I can attest to the alarming number of them. It is a deeply concerning reality. Story 46. There appears to be a significant amount of blackmailing occurring within the realm of power. It makes sense. Imagine you are a billionaire seeking to enact certain policies. Who will you choose to invest in? A candidate you can control through a damaging secret or one who cannot be blackmailed? You are likely to back the candidate who can be controlled. Now consider that this practice may have been ongoing for decades. Who forms a substantial part of the elite? It is a troubling conclusion, but it seems unavoidable. Story 47. I am a police officer working in this specific environment. Money does not influence child sexual exploitation, which occurs at every level of society and is determined by access, not wealth. A wealthy individual who can organize trafficking to a private island may be a successful predator. But so can a minor drug dealer who is able to intimidate the parents of children in his building. There are many more drug dealers than billionaires. Actual pedophiles who are sexually attracted to prepubescent or peripubescent children, either exclusively or not, are not common. Even most people convicted of child sexual offenses do not fit this description. If you have an average social circle, chances are you do not know anyone who is. Child sexual exploitation is not always perpetrated by actual pedophiles, especially when considering the most common victim age range of 13 to 16 years old. Some individuals are aroused by the sadism and degradation of the acts rather than by the children themselves, finding children easier to abuse than adults. This category also includes opportunistic sexual predators who generally do not care about their victims, or those interested in young teenagers but aware that it is much easier to abuse a 13-year-old girl than a less naive 17-year-old. Some individuals are socially unable to form sexual relationships with adults and target children instead. The term often used to describe this behavior is incompetent, which conveys a better understanding of the behavior while making them sound less dangerous. Though the difference may seem trivial, the end result is still an abused child. It indicates that interventions to reduce offending will not be universal and may not effectively address all types of offenders. Story 48. I can't remember the name of the documentary. It was about two twin brothers, one of whom lost his memory. Eventually, he discovers that throughout their childhood, their mother was exploiting them to upper-class individuals, affecting nearly their entire lives. In this documentary, the brother who remembers explains that many high-class people, including famous artists and politicians, were involved. As someone who listens to many true crime documentaries, I believe this issue is as prevalent as regular sex is to us. Epstein, P. Diddy, R. Kelly, and Weinstein are just the tip of the iceberg. Children go missing every single day in this country. This world is full of predators. I bet there are many reading through these comments as well. They are everywhere, harming our children and ruining their lives forever. It is an epidemic we have never truly addressed. While we talk about how much we hate these individuals, we often tend to ignore them. Some men will even go on video to claim that Michael Jackson was a predator, yet many defend him simply because he could sing and dance. Story 49. The Epstein's Island situation is essentially a blackmail operation involving numerous elites. Many individuals are unwilling to speak out and prefer to remain anonymous due to their extensive connections, fearing they will be silenced. The lawmakers are the same individuals who are breaking the laws. Story 50. I assume it is extremely common. The kind of people who desire fame are often seen as unattractive individuals. Story 51. As I keep saying, this problem is easily solved. Implement mandatory life imprisonment for anyone convicted of assaulting a minor. I do not understand why people think they should be allowed to roam free. I also do not understand how they can impose a mandatory sentence of 40 years to life for drug use, yet allow these offenders to be released, often in less than 3 years, without any tracking devices. I believe there is more happening than I want to know because it is widely permitted. Furthermore, I believe it is a form of total assault on minors when adults consent to their child marrying an older man, allowing him to exploit her under the guise of legality, which is true evil. Story 52. Way more than you think. It's not uncommon for underage girls to sleep with older men, even in America. My wife told me her first experience was with a 27-year-old. I work in law enforcement and specifically focus on internet crimes against children, and I deal with it frequently. There is a disturbing amount of information that goes unsaid on a non-celebrity level. Considering the power dynamics, money, and connections at the celebrity level, I'm surprised it has only come out recently. Story 53. I suspect it happens more often to undocumented children than to children of other racial backgrounds. They have been told from a young age that the United States is their best chance to avoid starvation. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins in other countries rely on money being sent to them. These children are conditioned to remain unseen and to avoid law enforcement to prevent their families from being separated. I believe there are many individuals in California and Texas who are financially supporting these caravans once they cross the border with smugglers. Exploitative individuals already exist in every major city. Story 54. Depends on what you mean by pedophilia. Are you referring to wealthy older individuals engaging with 8-year-olds? This occurs more often than you might think, though less frequently than conspiracy theorists would suggest. Men of all ages grooming young women from the time they develop can occur nearly constantly. I know someone might argue the difference between pedophiles and individuals attracted to pubescent teenagers, but if that's you, take a moment to gain perspective. Women grooming young boys happens far more than is reported. I say this as someone who had a 35-year-old dominatrix at age 17, fully aware of my underage status, and who was sexually assaulted by women twice before turning 18. There are entire countries with long-standing traditions of pedophilia or borderline pedophilia, and most nations, including the United States, still permit child marriage. Many individuals claim they are waiting for change, but let's be realistic. Story 55. It depends on how you define the boundaries. There is a significant issue involving inappropriate behavior with minors, but I do question how much of it is genuine attraction versus simply taking advantage of vulnerable individuals. Story 56. A lot of troubling issues happen in this world. I'm sure the underground networks involved in exploitation are significant, just like the drug networks. It's truly disheartening. I believe some successful individuals may exhibit unsettling behavior due to their own childhood trauma. Additionally, some people reach a point where typical experiences are no longer satisfying, leading them to seek out more extreme activities. It's all sad and inhumane. Story 57. Question. What do you believe is the best way to preemptively rehabilitate a pedophile? Scenario 1. Doctor, I have thoughts about hurting people. I'm angry and I see them as an outlet for physical violence. Doctor, you have anger management issues and then treatment. Scenario 2. Doctor, I'm always sad and apathetic. I feel like hurting myself some days. Doctor, you have manic depression and then treatment. Scenario 3. Doctor, I feel strange. I have inappropriate thoughts regarding children. Doctor, what happens next? Story 58. A lot more than we think. Sometimes it is even in plain sight, yet people do nothing about it, such as the recent Nickelodeon documentary. Now, just imagine how much more occurs in secret. Or, if you want to consider conspiracy theories, think of individuals who have the power, resources, and connections to cover it up. It is a troubling world and always has been. Story 59. Watch some videos on YouTube of a person who goes on the dark web and tracks down offenders. They are everywhere, and it is not just men. There are many women involved in trafficking as well, making money. Story 60. I have no problem believing that pedophilia is a more common sexual abnormality than we assume. I know there are people who seek treatment for it and do not act upon it, and most who do feel extraordinarily guilty or ashamed. The fact that approximately 5% of children in the United States experience some form of sexual abuse at some point indicates that it is disturbingly common. Story 61. More than people would like to believe, it often involves those who constantly complain about it. Story 62. It is frustrating to see individuals posting inappropriate content in normal conversations to derail or steer discussions in their direction. They seek acceptance for their preferences, but it is unlikely to happen. Story 63. Among the wealthy, such as multimillionaires and billionaires, it is likely that half are disturbed and half are not. That level of wealth can corrupt individuals, making it difficult to relate to others, connect, or socialize, which can lead to insanity. Story 64. I think it occurs more often than we realize. A good friend from high school was arrested for child pornography a few years after graduation. I hadn't seen him in a while when I found out. From what I heard, he didn't have much and avoided jail time by leading them to a significant operation. Story 65. A lot more than anyone realizes. It's not just that there are predators flying under the radar. There are also people with troubled minds who refuse to be predators. Story 66. I have known many individuals who exhibit inappropriate behavior throughout my life. It occurs more often than one might realize. Story 67. My partner works in child safety. There are offenders everywhere, including school teachers in our area who have been caught sexually abusing their students. Some have gone to court, but their cases have been dismissed because it was claimed that the girl would feel bad about her father going to prison for his actions. Story 68. At least hundreds of thousands participate in secret organizations worldwide, with lobbyists in positions of power everywhere. Story 69. Google reports that 1 in 9 girls and 1 in 20 boys under the age of 18 experience sexual abuse or assault. 82% of all victims under 18 are female. Females aged 16 to 19 are 4 times more likely than the general population to be victims of rape, attempted rape, or sexual assault. These statistics are specific to the United States and are concerning. Story 70. Well, considering that approximately 1 in 3 females have been sexually assaulted by the time they turn 18, I would say it is a significant issue. Story 71. It was 1 in 5 college girls who are sexually assaulted. 1 in 9 girls under 18 will be sexually assaulted, and 1 in 20 boys under 18 will be sexually assaulted. Story 72. I was a probation officer, and I can tell you that it happens frequently. Much of it goes unreported because families do not want this information to be known about relatives who engage in such horrid behavior. I had one mother who wanted the condition that the offender, her boyfriend, could not be around her daughter, the victim, because she wanted to live with him. Disgusting. Story 73. I work in an emergency room, and we handle sexual assault cases. I live in a fairly decent-sized city, not too big but not small. Police officers and detectives work alongside sexual assault nurse examiners for our patients. We receive cases involving children every day. That's only what is reported at my hospital's emergency room. I can't imagine the number of cases that go unreported. I had a friend whose uncle worked at a police department. I don't know his specific job title, but I know he had to handle many cases involving pedophiles. This included reviewing footage, videos, and photos, as well as gathering statements. Took a mental toll on him, and he ended up taking his own life. I have had people I considered friends who later turned out to be involved with teenage girls, full-grown men in their 20s whom I grew up with or worked alongside. These were individuals who were well-respected and had no problem finding women their own age. They are no longer friends of mine. One incident that really surprised me was when I discovered that my 36-year-old female manager had waited for one of our coworkers to turn 18 so they could date. Before that, they would sit in her car for hours after work. We assumed it was harmless because they were both women. Honestly, if the manager had been male, we would have said something, which is sad to admit. This wasn't the only manager who was essentially grooming teenagers. This was a company that employed many teens for their first jobs. In my 22 years, I have learned that anyone can be a horrible person, specifically a pedophile. It doesn't matter if they're a woman, man, manager, best friend, family member, or coworker. I'm no longer surprised by anyone's actions. Story 74. Considering the prevalence of pedophilia in the Catholic Church, Nickelodeon, Hollywood, and politics, it is likely more widespread than many of us can imagine. Many of these job positions and individuals are highly influential in their industries and wield significant power over their success. It is concerning how often lower-level employees or volunteers either fail to notice this behavior or choose to remain silent despite witnessing inappropriate actions. Story 75. I remember reading an Ask Me Anything by a sex worker. She mentioned that the number of men who asked her for some type of underage role play was disturbing. Story 76. At this point, I believe you cannot be successful in this world without having at least one child. Once those in power have compromised you, you either play along and achieve significant wealth or face severe consequences. If more than 30% of the country knows your name, it is likely you are compromised. Story 77. Well, it just depends on what we consider pedophilia. Are we following American standards or the standards of other countries? Assuming you're referring to America, it's probably less than 5% if we're being completely honest. And if we're discussing a high percentage among the elite, even then I don't believe it's that high. I would estimate at most 10% because a little-known fact is that around 5% of teachers are likely offenders. It's all around us, but I don't think it's a huge number. I believe wealthy individuals need more stimulation and control to act out their desires, and children provide that. When we refer to offenders, I am more inclined to believe it pertains to individuals attracted to those aged 15 and up, which was fairly common until the 1700s. It's not necessarily seen as pedophilia in other countries if it is the norm for wealthy men to take children as wives. I think it was common among the Amish in Rhode Island. There are many layers to this issue, making it difficult to simply label it as pedophilia. However, if we are talking about men strictly attracted to young children, I do not think the numbers are that high, at least in America. It just happens that when a wealthy individual engages in such behavior, it tends to be more publicized. Story 78. Anyone responding to this post will be monitored and tracked. I would not be surprised if this post was made intentionally to track those aware of the situation. Story 79. Children have been one of the most lucrative commodities in the world for as long as humans have existed, while wealthy and influential individuals are affluent because they have their finger on the most valuable resources. Pizzagate was always real. Do you really think Obama is flying $60,000 worth of hot dogs from Chicago? Story 80. I am acquainted with the former head of the Sex Crimes Investigation Unit in Jacksonville, Florida. It is much more common than anyone wants to believe. Jacksonville has a notably high population, and its investigations lead to numerous state, interstate, and federal inquiries, as well as some international cases. For one thing, women can be guilty just as often as men, and possibly even more so. However, they tend to be better at hiding their actions, receive lighter sentences, and often do not attract media attention. Story 81. Just search for how many children go missing every year around the world. The number is staggering. While not all of them are victims of human trafficking, it is still a significant issue. I recently heard that people attempted to lure several children into their car in a town near where I live, right in the middle of Germany. You would think we are safe in a developed country, but that is far from the reality. Such incidents occur frequently. Learn about Mark Dutroux and the chain reaction that followed his exposure. It's disturbing information. Story 82. Epstein lured many individuals this way. Wealthy and influential people become desensitized to conventional relationships, leading them to seek immoral experiences. It is not surprising that billionaires, who often gain their wealth through unethical means, may exhibit disturbing behavior. Story 83. The rich and powerful are either involved in inappropriate behavior or being blackmailed by those who are. If you don't believe that, it's time to wake up. Story 84. You could ask Jeffrey Epstein and his clients, but no, you can't. They are all highly protected. Story 85. Who knows what he has done or hasn't done? He hasn't been charged with a crime. He hasn't defended himself in a court of law against those charges. All of these people making accusations are accessories, right? Story 86. I have never heard Diddy's music, but if he is anything like every rapper I have ever seen, is anyone really surprised that he has been accused of rape and sexual assault? Rappers are often among the worst, and some seem to become even worse after they achieve success. Story 87. Less than it appears. Personally, I don't believe some of what we hear. Some of it is obvious greed. People who want money go after celebrities who have it. Sometimes they survive once, but after the first accusation, others start coming in like barrels in a game. At that point, you begin to wonder if they were committing these sexual atrocities. When did they ever have time to write their music? Story 88. Not surprisingly, liberals have always been a part of it, and this seems to happen frequently in the Western world, including political parties in Europe. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.